Hello, Philip.
Hello?
That's turned off completely. Is that better?
No, I've still got you. Hello, Mr. McDowell. What I'm going to do is, David, I'm going to kick you out of the meeting from your phone, and then hopefully you'll remain on the computer. But if you go completely, just go back on the link on your email on your computer.
Right. Okay.
It's all very complicated.
Oh,
Hi, David.
Yeah.
Hello, Malcolm there.
David, hello, darling. How are you?
Well, I'm all right. I'm all right. We're trying to sort. Oh, there you are. I can see you now.
It's crazy, huh? Crazy.
Yeah, but I can. I just had to tune in on my phone, and then because I couldn't hear anything. But Philip's got me on the computer now working.
Oh,
so
good. Okay, good. Oh, you're on the computer. I'm on the phone. Okay, but it works fine.
Yeah,
Good.
I think we're.
Hi, Philip. How are you? Good God, he's 12 years old.
Not quite that bad, but yeah, I'm very well. How are you, Mr. McDowell?
Good. Very nice to see you. Please call me Malcolm.
Oh,
no misters.
Very kind of you. Thank you very much. So we've got a small audience with us this evening. I'm just going to see if anybody's having any issues logging on or anything, and then we can make a start.
Oh, we have an audience. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, we have a few people that I think David has sort of spread the word. A few.
Oh, well, there'll be.
I told the foundation, Lindsay Foundation people, so we might get one or two of them.
Well, that's three.
Yeah.
They're dwindling in numbers, David,
Well,
unfortunately.
It's true. But they're very enthusiastic.
I know they are, I know. Who's left? Well, there's Paul.
Well, yes, we've lost Paul, but Paul Cotgrove is still with us.
That's what I mean, that Paul, yes.
Well, he was ill, but Paul Ryan, he died. You remember Paul Ryan?
Yes, of course I do.
Yeah.
I know, very nice guy, lovely man.
Yeah, well, and he wrote the book, of course, or he edited Never Apologize.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God.
Yeah, no, and he had
because I made a film also called Never Apologize. Or it was a DVD really of an evening, you know, of Lindsay Anderson that I did. Actually, I don't know whether you ever saw it live. Did you?
No.
It was on at the National for a couple of performances at the Cottesloe.
That's right. That's right. No, I saw it on the screen later on, and no, it was very good. But that title, how did Lindsay use that? Was that in? A speech or what?
It's a line. It's a line from she wore a yellow ribbon. I think it's the last line of the movie when he says, "I never apologize. It's a sign of weakness."
Oh, right.
It's a John Ford.
Yeah. So now, what's this Western that you've just done? That sounds extraordinary. That it was one that Lindsay directed.
God, Did I send you a picture?
No.
I'll send you a little one shot, you know. I mean, it's a very small budget, but I had to do it. In fact, get this, Lindsay was going to direct it. Oh, God, how many years ago? Yeah. He was staying with me in Ojai, and I was going to do this Western with Bill Paxton. Yeah. And I had the script, and we didn't really have a director. And I said, look, you've always talked about Westerns. How I said, if you want to do it, here's a script, read it. And he goes, well, I think I'd rather like this. I think we could do it. So I got him. We had a lunch with Bill Paxton, and then Lindsay went back to England, and within 6 months he was dead. You know, so sadly, one that got away. So and Bill Paxton died, and the producer came over 2 years ago, and I said, why don't we make that movie, you know, The Last Train to Fortune, and why don't you get James Paxton, his son, to play that part? And he actually got the money to do it. It was a sort of off the cuff thing, you know. So I was quite amazed. I know.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was great because, you know, we used this amazing Western set, which is actually the old Gene Autry ranch. It's absolutely amazing. And I mean, it's a huge set. It's almost, I mean, it's like a town, you know. It's got more than one street, and a huge long street, buildings either way, with a saloon, a church, a school, everything that would be in a Western town. And you know, that's where Tarantino shot the end of you know, his last movie, the Hollywood one with
yeah. Oh God,
DiCaprio and
yes.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Thank you. And it's really you know, it's where the family, the Manson gang, are hiding out. That's where that was the Melody Ranch. That's what it's called. Anyway, and it's also where High Noon was shot. I mean, it's so iconic. It's so amazing to even be on this place. You know, it's really, there are so many ghosts, and it was so much fun. And I got Bernadette Peters to come and do a bit in it. She plays the saloon keeper, and she was so great. And my ex, Mary Steenburgen, came and played a very important scene at the end. So it was really lovely to have friends, you know, that came around to do it. And so that was great. We've still got to do 3 more days with horse shots and all this, you know, riding over the horizons and all that kind of stuff.
Wow. Who would have guessed that you could be doing that?
I know.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was great. The only thing was the guy never shuts up. He's got verbal diarrhea, so it was quite a pain. But other than that, it was great.
How long were you on it? Or what, you've got more to do, but how long were you there?
15 days shoot.
Really? Good heavens.
So I asked, we were doing a campfire scene. We did that in a studio, thank God. And I sort of said to the, you know, script, I said, how long was that? That was more than 5 minutes, wasn't it? She goes, that was 20 minutes.
No.
20-minute takes. You know, this, you can do that now with digital, you know, you can shoot forever. Amazing.
Well, it's it's a bit longer than the gym scene in If, isn't it? But that was quite long.
Yeah.
Maybe 7 or 10.
Oh, that was for its time. I think that was 8 minutes. What, Danny? Excuse me. I'm busy.
I go to lunch.
I can't go to lunch right now.
Not right now. I mean, at Union at 1.
Yeah.
When I get home.
Okay. I'll be with you. Great. Yes. That was quite a long take, actually, for its time. That was revolutionary, wasn't it?
Well, I think
so was the naked scene in the cafe. Do you remember the first assistant director walked off the film?
Yeah.
John Stoneman, his name.
John Stoneman. Yeah, well, he was rather frightening. I always felt he had a gun or something. I don't know.
He ended up in Canada being, I don't know, it kind of dropped out. And
really?
It wasn't for him.
No.
The business was not for him. You know? See if I can get this a bit closer.
He was probably quite good as a first assistant in the sense that he shouted a lot, and I suppose he got us moving.
Yeah, but the best first assistants, you know, don't shout. You know.
No. Well, they don't need to.
True. And they only when they need to, you know, which is very rarely.
Yeah.
And you know, if you've got somebody shouting around, it's not very indicative of a good working kind of atmosphere, is it?
No, I suppose it's that thing of time, isn't it? Of trying to press on.
Now, what are you doing? What are you doing now?
Well, I've still got my my children's show, which I've been doing for 15 years, The Tiger Who Came to Tea, which is for very small children.
Right.
And it just goes on and on. I've got 2 productions this year. There's one that's on tour at the moment.
That's brilliant, David. That's great.
They tour the UK all year, but they nip off to, they're doing Bahrain in a moment, a couple of weeks' time. I think they go off to Bahrain. They've already done Dubai, and they're doing Hong Kong. And,
now, do you get to go out there to?
No, I've never been. I leave them to it, really, because it's a tight-knit little group, and they just go over for a few days. But a second production, because it's become almost traditional now that we do it in the West End in the summer. And this will be the third or fourth year at the Haymarket, which, as you know, is a
wonderful. Oh, lovely theatre.
And we've been sitting there on top of Only Fools and Horses, the musical, which has been on for 4 or 5 years, but it's just finished. And,
really? Oh, wow.
So we're now waiting to hear what we've got to go on top of, but we're assured that it'll be all right. And the advanced box office is very good already. So I'll be directing.
Brilliant. Well done. Well done. Well, that's somewhere where parents can take their really young children and get them involved in theatre, and just that first experience of going into a theatre is indelible, never leaves you, does it ever?
Well, that's right. And you see, when you and I worked together, I was writing, I'd already written one, I think, and I was writing the second one, and it was for slightly older children. It was for sort of primary age, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 families. And
I think I came to somewhere like Watford and saw one of them.
I think you probably did. I think you may have seen either The Owl and the Pussycat Went to Sea, or you might have seen The Plotters of Cabbage Patch Corner, or Watford.
That's the one I saw, Cabbage Patch.
Well, I was in pantomime at Watford. You may have come to see me there. When was that? 67? No, that was before. No, it wasn't. It was just after.
I came with Lindsay. I drove him.
That's right. That's right. And I think I was giving my wishy-washy, and Amanda Barry was Aladdin.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's right. It was fun anyway. It was, it's good fun. Pantomimes are lovely.
It was, but what happened, I suppose, about 20 years ago was that people started doing shows for very small children, and that was unheard of, really, when I started. Mm-hmm. And I did 1 or 2, and then this one came along, adapting it, and it just seems to go on and on. It's lovely.
Brilliant. Well done.
I've got a very nice company. Who, a lot of them stay or come back and have a rest, and then they come back. And they're only 3. Well, you see 4 on stage in the end. You do see an extra one at the end, but they're only 3. And it will last 55 minutes. It's all very civilized.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
And it's always daytimes too. So I always have my evenings off, which is quite nice. But
wow, that's amazing. Of course, they have to go to bed early.
Absolutely. I mean, come on.
and you're getting of the age now where you have to get to bed early too. So it seems to work perfectly.
Well, I know. You are a little bit older than me, but only a few months. I was thinking the other.
Oh, is that all?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Well, it's a big year for us this year.
It is a big year for us coming up.
Yeah.
Never mind. We're still here.
That's it.
No,
still here. Exactly.
Well, when I was up in Stirling the other day.
Oh yes. With dear old, what's his name, McGee.
Oh yes.
Very nice guy, very nice man.
He's lovely, and he looks after the Lindsay archive.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, really well. And this exhibition he's put together for the Lindsay centenary, it's great because there's a timeline that goes right the way through, and you see Lindsay doing the early stuff, and then into White Bus, and then into If, and then on through right the way through to the Lillian Gish.
Right.
What was that one called? I can't remember.
Wales of August. I love that film. Yeah, it's lovely.
And also all the theatre stuff too. So all the Royal Court stuff as well is.
But that's huge. That's the major part of his career. The films are sort of really, in terms of a career, Lindsay's career, the films really are secondary to the stuff that he directed on stage. Yeah. I mean, he directed some of the absolute most magnificent plays that were written of that time. And of course, his collaboration with David Story is quite unprecedented. I mean, they did, I think, something like 12 plays. Yeah. It may be more, maybe less. I'm not sure quite how many. Yeah. I know they ended up doing one called Early Days with Ralph.
Yeah.
And he couldn't remember a line of it. And David would tell me that he was standing on the side of the stage at the National watching, part of it. And Ralph dried, you know, and he could just see the back of Ralph's head and his ears, and he just saw the actress that he was playing with. It was Rosemary Martin.
Yeah.
And he said, and he goes, and Malcolm, I looked at her face, and she was willing Ralph the line, you know, and he said, and when Ralph came out with a word, her face showed such bemusement and like, what? Not in a million years would she have thought that he would ever say this word, and the word was croissant. out of left field, out of nothing. Croissant. Yeah.
No, I remember Home particularly. Do you remember Home, which was the one? Of
course.
Feel Good, and
yes, and brilliant. Warren Clark and brilliant Dandy Nichols and Mona Washbourne.
Yeah, yeah, and well, of course, it was interesting because the repertory company, which included Mona, one felt that he used her a lot, and Dandy Nichols, I think he used her in something else. But I think that one, what I remember was that when he did the one where they put the tent up.
The Contractor.
The Contractor.
That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
And they put that thing up, didn't they? And they took it down.
When it went up, the whole audience applauded. It was like a magical moment, and they were all talking and working on it. And you thought, well, you know, what's happening? And suddenly the marquee flies up, and it was like a magical moment of theatre. Yeah,
yeah. And it was at the Fortune. I think it was a very small stage, I seem to remember. Was it, or was it at the Court?
I saw it at the Royal Court.
Yeah, I think maybe it transferred to the Fortune. I don't know, but it was a remarkable moment. And apparently the end of the play, when they'd taken it down and they tied it away, and they were left with just 2 chairs and a table. Yeah. And David Story saw that image and thought, well, let's start a play off with 2 chairs and a table. And that's how Home apparently started to be written.
Maybe. Well, you know, he did a lot of stuff, you know, going into mental institutions. You know, his one of his books, and I can't remember which one, a novel that he did, starts with his wife, who he goes to visit in a mental institution. And yeah, I mean, well, David Story was, you know, a very, very, one of our absolute best writers. He's a genius, really, I think. Yeah. I mean, in Celebration, I did it in New York. Lindsay directed it. And Alan Bates, you know, had done it in London. And when he called me about it, he said, you better come over. And he said, well, I want you to do In Celebration. And I went, well, which part? He went, well, Alan's. I went, I'm not following Alan. I saw that production 3 times. I am not following Alan Bates. No way. I couldn't possibly do that. Thank you, Dan. I couldn't possibly follow him. And he said, don't be ridiculous, Malcolm. And then by that standard, only one actor can play Hamlet. It's ridiculous. He goes, you have your qualities and Alan has his. And I said, oh, well, what's Alan's? And he said, jocular charm. I went, oh, and what's mine? He went, danger. And I went, no jocular charm. He went, no, not much.
Yes, because that was
I'm going to eat some bacon as we go.
Yeah. Now, Philip, you'd better ask us a question or two. We're chatting away here.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. Philip.
That's okay. Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us to talk about If. It is very much appreciated. The first question I had was, how did If come into both of your lives in the first place? What was, do you remember the audition process? Should we start with you, David?
Oh, well, yes. I was in Rep. I was at Worcester. I was in Little Malcolm and his, fun enough, Little Malcolm and his struggle against the eunuchs. And I'd written my letters to casting directors and everything, and television directors, and thinking, you know, one letter might fall on good ground, I might get something. And one of them went to someone called Miriam Brickman, who I didn't know at all. I hadn't really even heard of her, but she turned out to be sort of the film casting director at the time. And I got this invitation to come up to London to an audition at the Garrick Theatre. There were lots of people there when I arrived. And as I came off the tube, because they let me have a day off, because I was meant to be rehearsing for the next play in rep, and it was only 2 weekly reps, so there wasn't much time, but they said, yes, you can go up. And as I came up the steps from the tube, I slipped and I split my trousers right the way up from the knee up to the crutch. And so my first words to the great Lindsay Anderson were, I've split my trousers. And he didn't seem too fazed by that. And all these people there, and we had to sit round, about 8 of us, and read a scene. And after we did that, a lovely man called Neville Thompson, who was working on the film, came up to me and said, when do you have to be back in Worcester for the show tonight? And I said, oh, well, so he said, well, could you just hang on a little bit, because someone's not turned up. He said, we'd like you to help us by staying on. And of course, I ended up staying there for the whole morning, which was extraordinary. I never realized that it was, you know, going to be that they were interested in me or anything. And that was that. And then eventually I heard that, they asked me to go for another one, and I couldn't because we were rehearsing. And then they said I'd got a part, which was exciting, but they didn't say which part, and I hadn't seen a script. And then I was asked to go up on a Sunday when I wasn't working to a small studio in Soho to model the uniform, the school uniform. And I thought, well, surely they could get someone from London. Why have I got to go all the way from Worcester? But I thought, well, no, I must go. And Lindsay was there, and I had the uniform on, and he started saying things like, as they were filming me, oh, just look at the cameras, there, you hate it, or whatever. And this was my screen test, and I had no idea, not a clue what was going on. And eventually realized, and we were called, the 3 of us, Malcolm and Richard Warwick and I were, I think there was a lunch that we all went to. And until then, of course, I didn't know that Malcolm, I didn't know Malcolm or Richard or what they were doing. And I still hadn't read a script, but Lindsay thought I had read a script. And so all these instructions were coming out, like collect pictures for your studies, which he wanted us to do. And I didn't know what he meant, but eventually it all turned out nice. They sent me a script. I realized that I was very lucky because I was one of the 3 boys, and the rest followed. But Malcolm's story is different. He'll tell you now, I'm sure.
Yes, well, I was sent by my agent. You know, I was working at the Royal Court. We were doing a modern dress version of Twelfth Night. And so I went along. My agent said, oh, there's this film, it's about a school. And I went, oh, fine. So I rushed there, and then I was late. They were packing up for lunch, and I just got in time, and Lindsay Anderson jumped up on the stage. It was at a theater, so it was dark, you know, where they were auditioning. And he asked me what I was doing. I told him, and he goes, oh, sounds awful. And I said, well, you know, it's not awful. I mean, you know, every actor wants to work at the Royal Court, you know. And he goes, yes, well, yes, of course. Anyway, we chatted about the Royal Court, the various personalities involved, and he was quite scathing. So after a while, I joined in with him. And I said, yes, well, it is pretentious, let's face it. I mean, they've told me where I make my entrance, but nobody will tell me where I exit. And we're opening next week. He said, how typical. And so we were bitching. And then there was a sort of lull in the conversation. He said, you do realize, of course, that I am a director of the Royal Court. And I went, no, I did not know that. And I suppose I'm not going to get this part then, am I? And he went, not necessarily. So apparently, he told me later that he had more or less cast that part. I can't remember the guy's name now, but he said he was 80% sure that he cast it. And then he had a change of mind. And 2 weeks later, I went to the final audition with Christine Noonan. And I still hadn't read the script. I had no idea. I thought it was probably about a, comprehensive school or something. I didn't know what the hell it was. And when I arrived, he said, where's your script? I went, what script? I haven't got a script. I wasn't. He goes, oh, for God's sake, David, and started, berating the poor writer. But that was his relationship with Lindsay, as it turns out. And he was a lovely man, David Sherwin, and we became fast friends. And anyway, I was supposed to be concentrating, looking at this thing. Of course, I couldn't learn it. I just sort of read it half-assed. But I noticed this beautiful girl, and she was more intriguing to me than the script or the scene. And so we came to do it, and I, of course, hadn't really read it. I just read Mick grabs girl and kisses her passionately, which I did. Unfortunately, I had not read the next line, which was, girl slaps Mick across the face. Well, she didn't slap me. As it turns out, and this is what David Sherwin told me later, she actually punched me so hard that I ended up flat on the stage with tears running down my cheeks. After a moment, the absolute humiliation of being decked by this girl out of nowhere, and the script, of course, had gone. I don't know what happened to that. So I was so pissed off. I started to stalk her around the stage, and it was pretty electric. And I must say, I've always said, half jokingly, but sort of true, that Christine Noonan slapped me into film stardom. Thank you, Christine. I owe her, or I did. She was a lovely girl too. I really, it was lovely.
She was.
Yeah.
And it was, well, we lost her far too young. And do you remember that?
It was 10 years ago, wasn't it? Because
but do you remember that extraordinary moment when there was a screening at the BFI or somewhere, and you would be interviewed, and we went up to a party, and we both looked at this girl on the other side of the room and had a huge double take, because we thought it was Christine, and it turned out to be her daughter, who was spitting image almost. It was extraordinary, that.
Absolutely. It was a magical moment in a way. It was as if Christine had been there in her daughter, which of course she had. Yeah.
Well, her daughter has been in touch with me occasionally since. Lives in she lives in Cornwall, and I think,
what's she doing?
Well, I think she makes she's really quite spiritual and arty, crafty, and into plants and all that sort of thing. Nice. I think she makes props or pottery or something like that. But it was only a couple of emails, because I sent her. I found out who she was through a film director friend, Giles Foster, who Giles, who's a great fan of If, incidentally, but he lived or had a house in Cornwall, which was next door to where she lived.
Good Lord, really?
Put us together. But I sent her a copy of my little book, Filming If.
Oh, yeah.
And she wrote back as a result of that and said, oh, Mum would be very pleased and all the rest of it. But no, she was lovely, Christine, and
Yeah.
as was Richard. I mean, heaven knows we've lost both. of them.
He was adorable. I mean, really, you know, he wanted very much to play Cliff in the in New York when I did Jimmy Porter in Look Back in Anger, and I really wanted him, but the director, he felt it was too much like If coming or something. He didn't like the combination of us two, but he would have been a wonderful Cliff.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
I played Cliff very soon after we did If.
Yeah, really, yeah.
Back in Worcester. Yeah,
Lovely part.
He would have been
Lovely
perfect, actually, Richard.
I know, and you know, I went to the director and said, "Look, we've got to cast Richard." He goes, "It's too much like If. It's you know." And I went, well, "It's not as if was a huge boffo success in New York. I mean, it did okay, but you know, it's not hardly The Graduate, you know." But his mind was made up. Oh, there you are, Philip. How are we doing?
Yeah, we're doing great. So once you had both been cast and you got to know the script a bit better, what was your initial thoughts on the material itself? Because of course it was quite groundbreaking in many ways, some of the things that occur.
It was groundbreaking, yes. But of course, you know, when you're casting this thing, you don't think it's groundbreaking. Just think it's you know, it's just this little fantasy about, you know, these boys in school. And I'd been to a public school, as Lindsay said, yes, a rather minor one, which was true, but nevertheless, they have the same sort of, you know, structure and all that, and the hierarchy of the public school. And so, you know, I remember sitting there watching dailies of the chapel, and I was sitting next to Lindsay watching this, and he said, "Oh, I do love black and whites." And then he said, "Valerie, what are we shooting tomorrow?" And she said, "Oh, a scene, I don't know, with the housemaster or something." He said, "Let's shoot it in black and white." So this whole thing about the black and white versus the color, when it's completely arbitrary. It's just that Lindsay liked it, and some scenes he chose to do it. He had to shoot the chapel in a kind of monochrome because they couldn't afford to put, you know, all these big brute lights through this chapel. We weren't allowed to hang lights in the actual building itself because it was, you know, obviously some very old building, so they didn't want to damage it in any way. And the school, I think, were a bit worried about that. But yes, it turned out to be, I remember shooting the last, I'm sure David remembers this, but we were shooting the very last scene when we're on the rooftop shooting down and stuff. And Lindsay had a copy of the Times, and in it, on the front page, was a photograph of French students on the roof of the Sorbonne with guns. And he said, "Look at this, we're very timely." He was absolutely thrilled by this, that we were making a movie that was actually relevant to what was happening. You know, usually when a movie comes out, of course, it's too late, you know. Things are passed on. But it was really amazing. It was so much fun to shoot that film, wasn't it, David? We had fun.
Oh, yeah. No, well, I mean, I shall never forget so many moments that we had, but that thing of him almost feeling that he was being prophetic in what he was doing when looking at that photo. I mean, I think there was almost a slight annoyance in the fact that maybe he'd been gazumped by Paris, because they would think maybe that when the film came out.
No, I think he was delighted. I remember him being delighted that he was so current.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know,
relevant.
it is a bit of a masterpiece, that film. There's no question about it. I think it's truly a classic. It doesn't age or date. The themes are very universal and very today, you know. And I do remember him saying in Cannes to me, well, Malcolm, you should enjoy this because your career from here on in is going to go down. I went, oh, that's reassuring. And but in a way, of course, it's the most perfect film. You know, I've made some good films, but If is a very special film, really, in my canon, if you like. And it's truly one of the great British films. I mean, and very influential, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you remember the furore when it opened. My God,
yeah.
It was like, I mean, you know, all these politicians getting up on the soapbox. Of course, they'd all been to, you know, public schools.
Yeah.
The rest of the country, the working man could give a crap, you know. But all the kind of, you know, intellectual side of society in England and the UK, they were, you know, shocked because it was a real dagger into the heart of the establishment. And that was Lindsay's brilliance, you know, that I remember saying to him once, are you Labour or Conservative? I mean, which would you vote? He goes, I don't vote for any of them. I'm an anarchist. I went, oh, yeah, oh, yes. Throwing bombs in the street, no doubt. And I had a good laugh. You know, I used to tease him, but that film is, well, that, I know Lucky Man. Oh, Lucky Man's a very subversive film. Very. It was interesting, you know, that because, you know, that it's just really an attack on everything, that one. I liked also, you know, you can revisit Britannia Hospital, and it's a really wonderful film. Has some great things in it. I really love that film.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it gets short shrift, but it shouldn't. It's a really terrific movie.
I think the thing about If probably, because you said it doesn't seem to date.
No.
And that's in spite of the fact that, you know, we don't have mobile phones or anything in it. But where he was so clever was in having that uniform, and that hasn't dated.
No.
And
no.
also having no music of the 60s. It would have been so easy to
no.
Beatles music or whatever, wouldn't it? And that would date it straight away.
By the way, talking about music, that Miss Aluba was something I played at school, and I think David asked me, what would you listen to, you know? And I said, well, there's this Sanctus thing, the Miss Aluba. He goes, oh, I know the Miss Aluba. Oh yeah. And the next thing is Miss Aluba is in the thing, and while we're cutting out things, I'm listening to it. And it was amazing. I walked down Oxford Street after the movie came out, and I past a record store, number 5, Miss Aluba, Sanctus. It made it into the top 10. I mean, that's when I thought, wow, this is, I mean, it's a powerful medium, movies, you know.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, and the fact that I remember knowing that you had heard it and you had said, let's use it. It was your idea. And of course, the fact that they used it for the jukebox as well.
Brilliant.
Extraordinary. And yet, as you say, it suddenly goes into the hit parade, and it probably was on a jukebox after the film came out.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? It's a stunning piece of music, and it's so evocative in the movie. I think it's just amazing. You know, I liked all the music, and it was written by this guy, a Guy Wilkinson, I think.
Mark Wilkinson, yeah.
Mark,
Mark, is it Mark?
Yeah.
Or Guy?
Yeah.
Mark. who was the musical director, I think, at the National.
Mm.
And the music is really quite something.
Yeah.
And of course, those shots of the college.
Hmm.
Now that is Lindsay's, tribute and tip of the hat to John Ford. That could be Monument Valley. That's his Monument Valley shot in If. And it's so beautiful. And you go, my God, I wish I'd gone to a school like that.
Mm. Yes.
How lovely,
Yeah.
But of course, how brutal too. And it's, I thought Robert Swan, Ed Roundtree gave the most wonderful performance.
Yeah.
He was so kind of evil without being arch, and so authoritarian and cruel,
Yeah.
I mean, you could put him in a Nazi uniform and there you'd have it complete. But he was so good. I remember doing those scenes. And I didn't really know what on earth I was saying, by the way, about this is a typical David Sherwin line about, that badge on your tit, and then giving Coca-Cola to your scum or something, and teddy bears to Oxfam. When, what on earth does all that mean? But of course, I never said a word. I just said it, with a surly kind of, I knew it wasn't pleasant, but I mean, David came up with some great lines. It was, in a way, the perfect collaborator for Lindsay, because Lindsay would sort of just say, now this is what we do. And Lindsay's whole thing in writing a script was, he was very concerned with construction, how it moves from one scene to another was more important to him than dialogue. He was very concerned about that. And I remember going through, endless discussions on Oh Lucky Man about that. Yeah.
Do you remember when we arrived in Cheltenham and we did a lot of filming without doing our sort of more intimate scenes, because Lindsay wanted us to get to know each other. And so we were in that CCF parade, we were all in our uniforms, you, Richard, Warwick and I, and we're not seen, you don't see us, but we did all that marching through Cheltenham and everything. And the other thing was we weren't meant to meet up with Roundtree and the Whips because Lindsay wanted this distance between us. And you, I think it was you who said, we're not having any of that, come on, we'll go down and see them. And then we went down and had a drink with them straight away, but I don't think we ever dared tell Lindsay.
Well, look, he thought, we weren't real actors yet, and he was right. I mean, in many ways, but we'd all been I'd been a professional actor for 4 years, so I know you'd been around the block a bit. Richard, I'm sure, had. And Richard is a very good actor too. Yes, wonderful.
Yes, that's right. He'd done quite a bit. But I think you and I were the oldest boys. We were both 24, weren't we? I think.
We had, you and I had the marvelous thing of stealing the bike.
Yes.
Stealing the motorbike, going out and picking up Christine on the bike. And that's the very first image that Lindsay told to me. It was, I see you on this motorbike. He said, can you ride one? I went, oh, yes, of course. And as you know, that's not quite true.
Not quite
true. There he goes, and the girl is on the bike, standing up. And she's, got this look of freedom. And I went, oh, wow, that's wonderful. Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember
it was great fun filming that too. And the place, the showroom where the motorbikes were.
Oh yeah, Twickenham.
Well, it was in Wimbledon, and
was it? I thought it was Twickenham.
No, that was Wimbledon. And I remember it particularly, because I live about quarter of a mile from it now, and it's now become a sort of pub. But my mother and stepfather came to watch shooting on that day.
Oh my God, really? Yeah.
And they had a little Morris Minor, which is in shot over the road, and you see it through the window when it's looking out at us looking into the window. So it's lovely. It always reminds me of that.
It's an amazing scene, that in that, you know, it's the decision has been made, freedom.
And that
and the moment of magic is really in the squash courts.
Yeah.
And he told me, when you beat me down into the corner and I get a cut or something and lift my hand up and go, blood, real blood. And Lindsay said, this is the moment now where the movie moves into a more poetic. Now I want you to do that in a special way. Give it something. I said, well, like what? I mean, he goes, well, you come up with something, you know. So I tried, but it was interesting. It is a wonderful moment, though. And it is the beginning of something else in the film. After all still on?
Yeah, still here. Yeah, got you back.
I've lost David.
Are we back?
Yeah, I think so.
You froze a bit there, David.
Yes, you froze too. It was a very elegant freeze. You look very good.
Yeah, so, and also, it was fun. You remember, of course, I know you remember very well, the sort of mock fight with the razors or the knives
in Cheltenham High Street.
Yeah, and this lorry driver jumped down and started whacking me on the back of the head with a hammer.
Yeah.
And by the way, you just watch this as if nothing's happening.
Well,
you didn't jump on his back or anything.
I was still lying on the ground. It was very funny because Screecher.
I know you were.
There were all these people watching, and this man got out with wielding the hammer. And of course, you being you, when he says, "What are you doing to this poor man?" or something, you were saying, "Well, he started it. It was all his fault," or whatever, playing up.
Yeah.
And it took a second assistant or whatever to come rushing up and explain to this poor man that
they couldn't get across the street because of the traffic.
Yeah, that's right. And there was a great cheer when this man eventually got back into his cab.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I know. That was great. Things like that make it, don't they? It's wonderful.
I also, in that scene, when I fell over, I split my trousers again. I seem to be very good at splitting my trousers.
Yeah, I think you better start looking at either getting better fitting trousers or going on a diet.
Yes,
either one.
Probably. Oh dear. No, they managed to stick them together with some camera tape. Shot, but actually in the film, if you wish to look at my thigh during that moment, you actually do expanse of thigh just for about.
I've never noticed. I will look next time.
Do.
I see it.
But
I don't think I've watched the movie from beginning to end for quite a long time. But every time I watch it, I see something else in it. It is so Lindsay, isn't it? So much the master, you know, and really the master at the top of his form, I think, in a very, very creative way. He was like that on Oh Lucky Man, but he was a little more, I think, a little more, I almost use the word depressed, but it's not depressed, pessimistic about things. There was a pessimism about the way things were. And of course, you know, he should have made more films. Partly, of course, his own choice. And I know he was kind of sort of jealous of people like John Schlesinger, who would make these Hollywood movies, you know. The truth is, but John Schlesinger, of course, was very jealous of Lindsay for making these wonderful art films. So you know, can't have it every which way.
At the end of shooting, I think it was John Stonehouse, actually, the first director, who, before I left, saying, you know, thank you very much and all that. But I said, do you think this will be successful? And he said, oh, well, he said, you know, it'll be very good at the
art houses.
In the art houses, and that one in Oxford Street, what was that called? The famous
Classic. The Classic, is it?
Which one?
The Classic.
No,
One of the classics.
No, it was another one he mentioned, which only did sort of big art films. And
oh, the Curzon.
No, began with A. The Academy, was it? I don't know. Somebody will know. No.
Yeah.
But in other words, he was saying that it won't be a big commercial success or a wide success. And of course, that was proved to be wrong. That was what's so extraordinary. You suddenly saw these queues going around the Paramount or wherever it opened in
amazing
in London. It was extraordinary because it wasn't really expected to be.
I got a call from him. You know, I was at my parents' and in their flat in Buckingham Palace Road. And Lindsay called and said, where are you? I went, well, I'm with my father. He said, get him to come over right now to the cinema, right now. I went, okay, I'm all right, great. What is it? He said, you'll see. So we drive up and this long line, I went, oh, that must be for the Haymarket one, that Odeon. And I went, oh no, the queue goes right past the Odeon, all the way up the street. And there we drive up, and Lindsay and Michael Medwin were jumping up and down, going, we're a hit, we're a hit. And it was so great to see it because it was so nice to see the joy, you know, in his face. And it was just really fantastic.
Yeah.
It was great.
I tell you who sadly died 2 or 3 months ago now, maybe, at the age of 100, believe it or not. And that was Geoffrey Chater.
Oh, he was lovely too.
Wasn't he wonderful? I mean,
played the vicar, the
chaplain, yeah, the chaplain who you shot, yeah. But of course,
he was wonderful when I was banding him. I'll never forget. He was really wow. And so Geoffrey went, oh my God! But he had a great life then.
Yeah,
extraordinary.
No, amazing. And apparently he was still, you know, he was still reading the lesson in local church and so on when he was 99 or whatever. So he was amazing. But the thing I remember too was when we did the drawer scene, him coming out of the drawer, which they say was the scene that Pinter said to Lindsay was the one thing. Maybe you went a little bit far with that scene. But
he can talk.
He can talk, yeah. But I mean, Geoffrey was wonderful. I mean, the way he just sat up there, and we corpsed, I remember, terribly, and Lindsay got quite cross because it was very funny, and we had to shake his hand.
Well, I remember taking him aside and saying, "Look, are you sure you want to do this? I think you're ruining this whole thing. You start doing gimmicks like this." He goes, look, Malcolm, look, he goes, do you believe it when the coach at 12 o'clock turns back into a pumpkin? I went, well, yes. He goes, there you are then, and walked off.
Right.
And he's right, you know, listen, it's very Buñuel. So, you know, and of course people talked about it as being Buñuel and blah, blah, blah. And he actually admitted to me that he'd never seen a Buñuel film, but he'd heard about it. He'd heard about them, but he'd never actually seen one, which I was amazed at. Because, you know, I'd get a call from him and he'd take me to the National Film Theatre a lot to see, well, mainly John Ford, but Kurosawa and just great. Oh, Humphrey Jennings. Every time Humphrey Jennings' documentaries were on, I'd go see them with Lindsay, you know. He really got me into that sort of very poetic kind of, I really got it where he, you know, he was his influences. He was influenced more by Humphrey Jennings, I think, than anyone. Even John Ford. Extraordinary. They're amazing documentaries, you know, really amazing. Yeah.
I must mention, of course, the cafe scene. First of all, the initial sort of animalistic behavior, and then, of course, on the floor when you both naked. What were your thoughts when Lindsay said to you about this scene, and how did you approach it as actors?
Well, I was a bit naughty because I'd been trying to take Christine Noonan for a coffee, or, you know, and she'd always gone, "Now, why would I want to take you? Why would I want to go and have a coffee with you?" And things like that. And I'd say, well, you know, maybe it's because I'm young, handsome, not rich, but on the way up. She'd go, "No, I don't think so." And anyway, I just thought it would be amazing when we were rehearsing it, that if we were sort of like animals, and if we were just down to the basics. And I did say to Lindsay, "What do you think you cut and we're naked rolling around?" He goes, "You ask her." So I sashayed over to Christine and said, "Look, Lindsay wants to know if you're prepared to do this, you know, a quick shot and we're naked." And she goes, "I don't mind." I went, "Really? Oh." So when it came to it, I must say I was a little shy about getting my kit off, but Christine came out, dropped her dressing gown and was ready to go. So that was it. And I think it was one of the very first times in a major movie like that you know, man and woman have been naked together. This is just before all that, you know. I think Hair had come out, hadn't it, David? Hair was already with us.
Yes, I think so. Just about.
Just before.
Yeah. No, it was, but it was still fairly revolutionary. And of course, it wasn't in the script. It wasn't in the original script.
No, and that's why, you know, we had to ask, of course. I mean, today, you won't believe it. Now, if you're doing a scene, even a kiss or something, you've got to have a special coach.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hilarious. I've just done this film, and, you know, I mean, ridiculous amount of my age anyway, even getting involved with this kind of crap. But, you know, they still put you through it. And I've got to take instructions from this lady who was, and I'm going, wow, okay. She goes, yes, well, I said, but I'm nearly 80, for God's sake. This girl is 22. She goes, well, that's what they want. I went, oh, well, okay. Well, there you are. Yeah.
Yes, your
ridiculous.
intimacy.
I refuse to take my clothes off. I go, nobody is going to want to watch a man of my age take his bloody clothes off. And I said, the only one I remember doing that was John Gielgud. Remember in that French movie, Provenance or something like that?
Yeah.
He was naked for half the film. And it was sort of amazing. Well, but he was an amazing actor, let's face it. Lovely man. Yeah.
Well, there's this play just opened at the National called The Motive and the Cue, which is all about Gielgud directing Burton in Hamlet on Broadway.
Oh my God, I'd love to. Oh, is it hilarious?
Well,
we're going to
see it next week. Mark Gatiss is playing Gielgud and apparently is really rather remarkable.
Oh, well, but it's easy to mimic him, really, you know.
Yes, that's right. And if he gets the voice right and so on. And
yeah.
But Johnny Flynn, whose work I don't really know, is playing Burton. And Tuppence Middleton is playing Elizabeth Taylor. but it sounds as though there's a lot of stuff when they're rehearsing, because there was this actor playing a smaller role, and he smuggled a tape recorder, a cassette recorder, into the rehearsal room, apparently a lot, and wrote everything down afterwards, and they've used a certain amount of that
oh my God. You know, I was supposed to do The Importance of Being Earnest with John, directing it with this wonderful Australian actress. Who would that be, David? Can you think of the name?
When was this?
This was in, well, it must have been after Clockwork, I guess, mid-70s, something like that.
Yeah.
Or early 70s, maybe. And, you know, we met in New York, and, oh, she was wonderful. A really great actress. And we'd go to dinners, and all this went on for a while. Maybe I was doing, look back, no, it was way before that. Anyway, they, in the end, they wouldn't trust John with directing it, which was ridiculous. I mean, what was her name? Oh God, I'll remember it, of course, when this is all over. But names, I'm really bad with names now, so really bad. So anyway. Oh yes, I can't remember.
I remember if Philip is still asking about the cafe scene. When the idea came up, when it was broached to Christine to do the nude scene, as it were, she came up to me, and I suppose I was looked upon as an avuncular person, I don't know, but she came up and said, should I do it? And I said, well, you know, it's entirely up to you. But I said, I think you should probably phone up your agent. So she said, I haven't got an agent. And she said, this is only my second job. She said, I played Gigi at Ipswich Rep, and now I'm here. So I said, all right. So I said, well, what about your husband? Because she was married.
Yeah.
And, she said, I'm not worried about him. So I said, well, I'm sure, you know, they'll clear the set and it'll all be right. And of course, then she did it. And the other thing, when I was in Stirling the other day at the screening, to celebrate Lindsay's centenary of his birth, someone in the audience, as they often do, asked me about the thing of putting the saucer on the cup while you were indulging yourself the other side of the cafe.
Yeah,
and,
lovely moment.
And I said that I was proud of the fact that that was mine, and that Lindsay allowed me to do that. And when I suggested it, he said, all right. And
no, it was the perfect thing. It was a very much a Lindsay Anderson moment that you found.
Well, yes, I think so. And I mean, you know, I was worried about your coffee getting cold, you know, my friend.
Of course, of course.
You were.
Well, the marvelous thing about it is that gesture, is that here we go again. It's oh my God, you know, there he is again, and just this whole thing of you doing that says a lot about your character being, you know, a sort of protector, if you like, a nurturer. You played the nurturer in the film.
Yeah, I always felt I was the sensitive one, because that line, the clue was the line about cancer, when I had to say, my mother took 6 months, or whatever the line. And that was the interesting scene, of course, where we were very confused the day before. It was the one about banging a nail into one's head slowly or something. And
it's brilliantly done. And weren't we drinking vodka, and then Lindsay plied us to try and get us drunk? Can you tell that story while I go to the loo?
Oh, go on then, off you go. Yes, this was a scene that we didn't really understand, where we had to talk about the most horrible way to die. And the three of us went to Lindsay and said, you know, we don't really, and he said, no, you're quite right. Dreadful bit of writing. Don't worry. He said, come in early tomorrow and we'll improvise around it. We'll find a way of doing it. So we came in before everybody else on the set and spent an hour or so working on this scene and seeing it different ways and blah, 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 blah. And finally, happy to go ahead, and everybody arrived and set up the shot. And that was when Lindsay said to Stuart Baird, and Stuart Baird became a successful film director, but he was the sort of runner.
Yeah.
Said, go and get Stuart what I told you. And Stuart came back with a bottle of whiskey. And this was about 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. And we were made, the three of us, to drink a considerable amount of whiskey before shooting the scene. So we were all in hysterics before we even started. And he got cross with us there and saying, oh, come on, you're meant to be professionals. And we said, seriously, we've just been giving it up. He said, get on with it. And we shot it very quickly. And he seemed happy with it. And it wasn't until I actually saw the film that I realized that we had said it word for word, exactly as it had been written. So he got us back to what was originally there, while we were thinking that we were being clever and, and improvising our way to something that was more sayable or acceptable. No, he was very remarkable in that way, no question.
The other great scene that we did is the waiting for the beating. And then, of course, which was brilliant cinematically. It's a brilliant scene because you just hear what's going on, the wax, and the anticipation is glorious. And then opening the door and looking in. And then, of course, the beating scene itself. And I remember Lindsay saying to me when we finished that, he goes, Malcolm, I'll tell you, if this film is not a success, he goes, but I think at the end of the day, we can say that this is a great scene. And I think he was right. It is an amazing scene, really. Yeah. Very brutal, isn't it?
Well, very, yeah, and beautiful. Again, in the famous dummy script, which we were given.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly, when I arrived in Cheltenham, and probably you as well, Neville Thompson came round with this dummy script, which was a fraction of the thickness of the real one. And he said, here's the script. And I said, no, but I've got a script. I've been learning my lines. And so he said, no, this is the one you take into the school. He said, you don't take the real one into the school. And of course, in that dummy script, the beating scene is described, it just says Roundtree suggests a suitable punishment, full stop. And there's nothing about the actual beating at all. And that, I suppose, is how they managed to get round the headmaster of Cheltenham to allow us to film that.
Amazing, yeah.
And I donated that because Carl, the archivist up at Stirling, where they keep Lindsay's archive.
They didn't have one?
No, and he said, I think that this must be the only one in the world in existence. So I said, well, you know, I'll donate it. And my script as well, which I still had, and my school tie, because I pinched my school tie at the end as a souvenir. So they've got them in Scotland now.
Yeah, but, good.
But, no, it was nice up there, and the people do. It's amazing. There are people who come to see IF from all the generations. You get students who probably have come to it through their film courses and the fact that it's still in the top 10 Time Out British films of all time.
Oh, yeah.
But then you've got our generation who saw it, or maybe a little bit younger than us, but they saw it when they were at school, and it was a sort of cathartic experience for them because they were going through it at the time. And then you've got other people who regularly see it, and whenever it comes on television they always see it, and they've got the video and they've got the Blu-ray or whatever, but if it goes on in a cinema they rush to that because of course there's no comparison really seeing it on the big screen. And the print, I have to say, the print they had the other day, I didn't see the whole film, I'll be honest, but it was a very, very good print. I don't know whether they've restored it, but it really looks,
they definitely restored it, for sure.
Looks lovely.
They must have done it for the release of the the DVD in 4K or whatever it is, or Blu-ray or whatever.
Yeah, no,
It's
it really
interesting.
does look very, very good.
And of course, it was one of Mirek's, one of his incredible masterpieces. You know, he of course did all Milos Forman's movies.
Yeah.
The great one being Amadeus, from the lighting point of view, being a period movie and all the rest of it, was extraordinary, exquisite to look at, you know. And of course, the whole thing with Mirek, I picked him up from the airport when he came back after the tanks had gone into Prague. Oh, it was amazing. And he was, you know, he couldn't speak English, of course. I don't think he ever learned English, but he was so excited and scared, you know, and the adrenaline was really pumping. And he stayed at this you know, these flats called the White House or something, you know, where they are in sort of Houston, somewhere like that. And of course, I said to him, be careful, because, you know, there'll be, of course, the KGB will be watching you and all the rest of it. And it turns out that that's exactly what they were doing, you know. Yes, he was, of course, one of the great collaborators of Lindsay, along with that, the brilliant Jocelyn Herbert. And
Yeah.
Jocelyn was one of the most spectacular talents and people that I certainly met, you know, in that period. She was absolutely brilliant, and often, you know, grated up against Lindsay, and you know, they had some spectacular rows. She was pretty much always right. You know, he would say things to her like, oh, you're so full of good taste, as if it was the most awful thing, just to get his own way on things, you know, because all those corridors had to be painted. You know, they were all color corrected to the way she wanted it to look. I mean, it's a great piece of art direction, that movie, because it doesn't stand out at all. You think, oh, that's how it was. Absolutely not.
No,
she had everything painted, and, you know, and oh, well, they had
that dormitory that we were in.
Oh yeah, that was painted too. Sure.
The story was that it was so awful, the actual decoration of it.
Oh yeah.
That they had to change it, and Jocelyn wanted it whatever color. But the headmaster of Aldenham insisted that they painted it back to whatever sludgy green it was before.
Of course, because otherwise it would stand out as being different from the rest.
Yeah. That was a dreadful place.
Was that at Aldenham? That was at Aldenham, was it? That scene?
Yeah.
That's a wonderful scene, isn't it? I love that scene.
I love that scene. Yes.
Clapping and you and Richard, and then Peanuts, of course.
Yes, he was a real one-off, wasn't he? You know, he ended up. I say ended up. He became a very successful owner of a recording studio, where a lot of major bands and everything recorded. He set this up. But he was. I mean, he was himself. I mean, when you saw him afterwards,
a lovely guy.
He was exactly the same.
He showed up in New York when I was doing Look Back in Anger, and came round, and we went for a drink. It was so great to see him. And I always loved that scene of him with the telescope and looking up. It was one of my favorite poetic scenes.
And just handing you the bullet. He has absolutely no interest in the bullet whatsoever. Hands it back to you, and he just does it beautifully. Yeah,
I know. And of course, his with those teeth.
Yes, charge, whatever. Yes. With the
bayonet. It's a scream of.
Yes, it's the scream.
Really, beautifully done. Yeah.
No, it was quite something. And I was remembering the other day, I was remembering Peter Braham, who was our stunt director.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
And him, well, of course, he had to teach you how to drive the motorbike. And I remember watching, thinking, oh my God, I've got to be on the back of that motorbike.
Did you see me fall off it?
Oh, I probably did, but I trusted.
No, it slid. It slid because it was on a field.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a little bit damp and the wheels just went. And I just lay there and I thought, I'll just lay here, see if anybody bothers to come over. And Michael Medwin sprinted over. He thought one of his main actors was dead or something.
Yeah.
And I just looked up and smiled at him. He went, "Oh, Malky, really?" Gave me a heart attack. He was another wonderful character too.
Yes,
Michael
of course, he lived to a very great age too. We only lost him,
I know,
last year, didn't we? Yeah.
97 or something. I know, he was
that's right.
Lovely man.
He was still acting in his 90s. He was playing one of the mechanicals in Midsummer Night's Dream at the open air Regent's Park.
Was he really?
Yeah,
Fantastic.
Having a lovely time. But I always remember when on the day that we shot the motorbike stuff,
yeah,
they were parked on a sort of roundabout, I suppose. I don't think it was the one we went round, but I remember so clearly that Peter Braham, I overheard him say to Michael, I have to say that I can't take any responsibility for what might happen today. And I thought, well, that's wonderful, wonderful. And we were very near the end of shooting, so they got the film, even if we were killed. But
you know, I felt pretty good about driving that thing.
You were very good. You were very.
I felt really confident, good. It was. I just went for it. I went, hey,
yeah,
and.
Well, then
of course
we shot it once, going round the roundabout and up the other side, and Lindsay immediately said, "Right, well, let's go again. Just go a bit faster, Malcolm." He said, "Go a bit faster."
Yeah.
And I suppose you did, but no, I remember with great affection that I was sitting on the back and we were going at quite a speed, and it's actually in the film where you sort of turn a little bit to me and you sort of out of the corner of your mouth saying, "You're all right."
Yeah.
Yes, I'm all right.
Yeah. Well, you know, they did speed up the film.
Yes,
when we came to park in the cafe.
Yes.
If you look at that, it's all like speeded up. They just wanted to, you know, but yes, yeah, that was amazing, really. And well, we've covered that film pretty well.
We've done quite well. Yes. Jocelyn Herbert, going back to her.
Jocelyn, yeah.
Our designer, who was lovely. And not long after, I was in a play for the RSC.
Oh, yeah.
At the Aldwych. And we opened, or the press night, and I was sharing a dressing room. And there was a knock on the door. We were busy getting dressed and everything in order to have people in for the drinks and all that, friends and relatives. Right. But very early on, there was this knock on the door, and this little old lady was outside. And she came straight in and sort of saying, "I just thought I'd say how much I enjoyed it. Was it all right for you or whatever?" And we were really rather abrupt and trying to take a bit of makeup off or whatever we were doing. And she stayed she sat down in a chair. And I thought, who is this mad woman who goes around to people's dressing rooms asking if they're all right? And eventually she left. And we saw a few people, and very nice. And I was leaving the theatre, and at the stage door, standing there, was Jocelyn. And Jocelyn Herbert hadn't been round to see me, but she was there. So I immediately said, "Oh, you know, Jocelyn, hello." And standing by her was this little old lady.
Oh. And
Jocelyn said, "Oh, David, have you met Dame Peggy?" And I had absolutely no idea. I had no idea it was Peggy.
That was her best friend. Yeah, I know. Listen, I met Samuel Beckett over at Jocelyn's. I went for dinner. She lived in Pembroke Place. No, sorry, Penzance Place. Oh no, Pembroke Gardens, one of those anyway. And I remember getting a call saying, "Malcolm, come for dinner. We're having an early dinner or something." Anyway, I walked round. I could walk from my place. And there was Samuel Beckett. It was such, I mean, amazing just to be in his presence, really. It was great. It was great. She was an amazing woman, I think. I used to go down to her farm, Andrew's farm. And in fact, that's where she passed away, you know, just in a deck chair, sitting in her garden, and just passed away. And she must have been 90 odd. You know, she had an old Alvis. I had an Alvis. So, and the Alvis she had was George Devine's. And I said, "Oh my God, you've still got that car." She goes, "Oh, I have to take it to Wales, this little mechanic. I mean, who fixes it up? And it cost me a fortune, but, you know, it belonged to George and I just can't give it up." And I said, "You shouldn't." It was really, I mean, it was parked on the street, you know, this wonderful old car. I mean, it was amazing to see her in it. She just loved it. And it was really, I think it was just her, you know, love of George that she kept it going. It was sort of very romantic. It really was a beautiful story, you know.
I wanted to ask you both, do you remember Graham Crowden? Of course, there's this wonderful history scene. Do you remember the history class?
Absolutely, great scene. Of course, him cycling in. He was such an eccentric anyway. Brilliant actor. And, you know, I'm so glad that he ended up playing the lead, you know, in more or less in Britannia Hospital. But he was so wonderful as the history master. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Coming in, throwing the essays.
Yeah.
And it has been said of George III was a mollusk king. Said by whom? Travis? J.H. Plum. Possibly. Great stuff. That's pure showing.
That scene was in the dummy script. That was the last scene. They came out of fantasy and came back to you being asked that question, and you answered it, and he said possibly, and that was the end of the film, which is extraordinary. I mean, I don't think it was serious. I mean, because it was the dummy script and it was just to get us the tool.
Crazy.
That scene was divided up, and it was as though the whole thing was a dream in your head, in Mick's head, before answering that question. But no, Graham was a wonderful man, and I got to know him quite well later on.
You did, yes, I know. He was a wonderful actor too. I remember during, I think it must have probably been during Oh Lucky Man, that I think he was also in a play at the National, and I remember he was very nervous about getting there in the rush hour, you know. I think he was in I think it was Jumpers. Was he in that?
Yeah, I think he was.
I think he was. Anyway, he was the most brilliant actor. I just adored him. Yeah, really clever, you know.
He was in Black Comedy. Do you remember Black Comedy?
Yes, yeah. Oh, of course.
And
wasn't that Derek Jacobi?
Derek Jacobi and Albert Finney.
No, Albert wasn't in Black Comedy, was he?
He was the original. Yeah.
Was he?
Playing the gay.
Oh, maybe you're right. Yeah.
No, it was an extraordinary play. But Graham played the Colonel, and there was a thing where he had to sit back because, of course, it was all in the dark, but we could see. And he went to sit down, and it happened to be a rocking chair. And his reaction, he sat in this rocking chair. It was one of the funniest things I've said. The timing, was beautiful.
Yeah.
But I saw him playing King Lear.
Really?
Bristol Vic, and it was quite a difficult school's matinee, and he was brilliant. He was very, very good, because that eccentricity actually was perfect. He the last time I saw him was in Edinburgh, because he and his wife they moved back up to Edinburgh, where she.
Yes.
And he was very frail and had to be helped into the taxi.
Yeah.
And so on. But he said,
A great actor, great English, Scottish, British character actor. One of the best, up there with the other one I loved, Arthur Lowe.
yeah, well, we were lucky we had them both.
We had them both. And then we had of course, brilliant Mona Washbourne and Dandy Nichols. And they were in a scene in Oh Lucky Man too. And they were both brilliant. I had such a good time with them, sitting there talking on the set, you know. Great fun. That was the great fun about, you know, those movies. You could sit around and talk to whoever, John Gielgud or Ralph Richardson, you know, and all their stories. They were wonderful, wonderful characters.
Was there anything further from that story you just told, David, about getting you into the taxi? Was there something else? Was there an end to that story, or do you want to share?
What, getting the part?
Oh no, yeah, he was very frail, and he was you put him in the taxi. Was there a bit more to that?
Oh, with Graham. Well, no, one of the things he said to me was, he said, do you know my daughter? Sarah.
Oh yes, what was her name? Philippa?
Sarah. And I said no. So he said, well, she lives in Wimbledon too. He said, I think it would be very good for her to meet you. And I said, really? So this was arranged, and she's become a great friend. And she looks just like him. She's just as mad as a hatter as him. Great fun, and she's still working quite a lot. She does theatre, but she also does quite a lot of telly, and she's just done a film as well. She's just done a supporting role in something.
Great. Great.
But whenever I see her, of course, I mean, it's awful, sounds awful, but whenever I see her, I'm thinking of him an awful lot, because she looks just like him.
He was a very special person, no doubt. Yeah.
No.
So was Arthur Lowe. Arthur Lowe was another one. And also Peter Jeffrey was a lovely man, wasn't he?
Brilliant.
He just passed away not long ago, right?
Yes. Well,
terrible.
Yes. I mean, he was only, I think, in his 60s or early 70s when he died. Far too
was
young.
he?
Yeah, I think
that's too young.
Yeah, and because he was with, I don't know whether he still was, but when I was doing a play at Chichester in 1980, he came to see it with Annie Ross.
Wonderful.
They were partners, and I hadn't realized.
Really? My God.
Yeah.
She was a great friend of Bob Altman.
Oh,
I
right.
used to see her over there at the Altmans quite a bit. Yeah.
But no, he was so good, Peter, because he had some long speeches, and very dapper, and the way he did that thing of the hair problem.
That wonderful sequence where they walk in front of that building, the camera's locked off, and they just enter, and all of him talking about, and right the way through. And David got that speech from the headmaster's conference or something.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Verbatim, ripped it. And it's so ridiculous, but it's so perfect. Yeah. Oh, it's somebody actually said that. Yeah, that's where he got it from, apparently. Yeah.
We've already alluded to it a little bit with the cafe scene, but how much of the film as of course it's left to interpretation by the audience. There isn't any kind of right or wrong answer, but how much of the film do you think is fantasy, wish fulfillment, versus what actually happened to the characters?
Well, I think you've said it. You know, it's up to the viewer. It's whatever you want it to be. I mean, that's the beauty of it. Of course, from us as actors, we had to play the reality of the situation. You know, but you know, the brilliance really is in the script and how Lindsay interprets it. But you know, he was very sure about what he was doing. He had it in his mind, I think, from the very beginning, although some of the scenes he didn't quite know how to shoot. And I don't know whether David remembers this, but he had a big argument with Mirek about when the motorbike leaves the garage, sorry, never know whether I'm talking in American or English. Anyway, they had a big row because they thought it was the other side of camera left, camera right. I don't know. And there was a big to do about it, but no, I think honestly it's up to the audience how they take it. You know, you can take it on many levels, but it is a very poetic film, especially the whole of the end. And you know, I know people here have compared it to the Columbine shooting, which misses the point entirely, actually. That if you look at the film and the explosions of bazookas going off and the shooting, except for the headmaster who gets it from Christine right in the temple, there's no bodies. They get up and move around, move off, so that in fact it's in their mind. It's a fantasy of those boys and the situation that they're in, the absolutely claustrophobic, insufferable atmosphere of one of these institutions. And that's why people loved it, though. That is its strength, you know, that Lindsay really tapped into that big time. And of course, he thought the whole British establishment was ridiculous. He used to say, oh, they're like a sponge, you know. And he was right, because, of course, in the press, they were outraged about this movie, you know, when it first came out. And within a year, they were showing it in public schools as the, you know, so as Lindsay said, you know, it's the sponge effect of the establishment who takes the rebels and assimilates them into what they think and makes it part of the mainstream, which is exactly what they did. And they used to show it in public schools. I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, yes, I actually saw that at school. They showed it, you know, to show what other schools were like. You know?
Can be worse, sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, so I went to public school as well, and of course, very different, but you still recognise certain things. I think, David, I think you went to public school as well, didn't you? So there's sort of it must be.
No, I didn't actually. I went to 2 prep schools. The intention was for me to go to a public school. My mother certainly wanted me to go, but there wasn't enough money. And so I ended up taking I was very lucky, because I was 12 and I took the 12 plus, and there were very few local authorities that had a 12 plus, but West Sussex did. And that meant that I could go to a grammar school, which is what I went to. But I certainly, although I was never a boarder in the prep schools, there was one of the prep schools where there was a boarding house, and one sort of one heard about certain things that were going on there, which were very similar, I suppose. So I don't think anything in the script was a huge surprise, except of course that everything was just magnified, or just made that little bit more melodramatic sometimes. And as Malcolm says, I mean, the clue in a way is the title, which originally was Crusaders. When we auditioned for it, it was Crusaders, but I can't remember, Malcolm might remember, that it was Lindsay's secretary, I think, who came up with the title If, which is terribly clever. Was it
Michael Medwin?
Was it
Michael Medwin? What was her name? She was lovely.
Daphne Hunter, was it? Or was that?
That's correct. Daphne Hunter. Well done.
I get 3 points for that.
And I remember she was in the office and said, it's sort of like If. And they all looked at her. And Lindsay loved, of course, the 4 dots.
Yeah.
Had to be 4. Couldn't be 3. Had to be 4.
Yeah.
But yes, that was Daphne Hunter. You're absolutely right.
What it means, I think, is that you can interpret it in several ways, but what would happen if, and whether or not that is reality or fantasy is almost immaterial, but something might happen if such and such happened. And then, of course, you've got the Kipling poem, which is rather more to do with establishment.
It's from the poem.
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
From the poem, of course.
It's that lovely thing. There's almost a question mark at the end of it too, where you can interpret.
But it's so public school, is it not? That's could have been written as the Bible for public school education is if. I mean, that's basically, if you can, all those things they list off, treat disaster and triumph just the same. I mean, you will be a man, my son. Yeah, it's a lovely poem, actually. Quite ridiculous now, but still very beautiful.
True.
Well, Philip, I don't know whether how much
sorry.
longer do you want to go on? Because I think I may have to leave you at this point.
Okay, yeah, if you need to.
Yes, well, listen, thank you, David. It's lovely to see you too.
Lovely to see you. Thank you.
Well, I see you again. You seem very compos mentis. Great. I'm glad to see it.
Touch wood. No, we'll both keep going as long as we can.
Absolutely. We're the last standing. I'm glad you told me about Jeffrey, though. I mean, I'm glad he lived such a long, wonderful life.
Yeah,
that's great.
No,
that's great.
I was amazed that he was still alive, because although one thought of him, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because so many of them went really quite early. Even Ben Aris, who played the.
I did a movie with his son.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yes.
Jonathan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a very good actor.
Yeah.
And he goes, "You knew my dad." I went, "Oh, did I?" He said, "Yeah, Ben Aris." I went, "I love Ben. Oh, he was so good in that film." I love the little scene of him up in the very top of the building when he unpacks his thing and the loneliness. So, I mean, it was just, and that was the scene Lindsay said, "Let's shoot it in black and white, just because."
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, Philip, thank you for everything. David, it's always lovely to see you. We'll be in touch soon. Am I coming to England? Oh, I don't know. I was supposed to. Of course, they pushed the movie. Supposed to do a vampire movie, Lord Byron vampire movie. Who knows? It's supposed to go now. It's going to go in the autumn.
Well, if
it does,
we'll meet.
I owe you a dinner. We'll go to dinner. I'll take you to dinner somewhere.
Lovely. Well, last time we went to the Dorchester for cream tea. That was very
was very good, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't mind doing that again. I miss those cream teas. I know. Anyway, great to see you.
Two rebel schoolboys having Dorchester cream tea.
Yeah, exactly. At the Dorchester, no less.
Just right. Lovely to see you.
Philip, thank you.
Thanks very much, Malcolm, for joining us. It's been wonderful.
Yes, thank you. I don't know how I get out of this now, but let me go.
There should be an end.
Lee, okay. Bye.
Bye.
Do you want to hang on? Do you want to hang on, David, for a moment or two?
I can hang on for a moment or two.
I've just got a couple of wrap-up questions that may be of interest to you. There was a talk of a sequel. How much were you aware of that, and before it was fell apart?
Malcolm rang me whenever it was, I don't know, and said we're all going to be working together again. They're doing the sequel, and it never happened. But apparently, I think I'd become a clergyman. I think Malcolm had become a famous film star, which of course he was by then, and Richard. What was he doing? I can't remember, but it all took place at a school reunion. So they all came back to the school, and it ended up apparently with Roundtree, the nasty prefect, being crucified or something. It all sounded quite extraordinary. And I'm sure that there is a script that exists somewhere, but I've never seen it, and I don't know whether many people ever have, because of course David Sherwin, who wrote the screenplay of it, he died a few years ago. And I imagine it might be in Lindsay's archive, one ought to ask, but I doubt very much if it's something that could actually ever happen.
We were saying that so much of it is this reality, is this fantasy, and of course a sequel would have very much told you straight down the line what was real and what wasn't. So is it best that it was left the way it was, in a way?
I think that's probably true. I mean, I don't know what they could have done in a sequel which would have I don't think they should have done something which explained anything. I don't think that would have been good, but it might have investigated what might have happened if the years had rolled by, and what would have happened. I don't know, but no, I mean, obviously we were all alert to the idea and we thought it would be quite fun. But no, it was not to be.
So much is, unfortunately. Was John Howlett quite involved in the script? Was it more David Sherwin? Because obviously,
well, the original treatment was written by the two of them. They were at school in was it Sherborne or Tunbridge? I ought to know, but it was a public school at which they both were. Well, they both agreed they were hating every minute of it, I think, and they wrote this treatment together, and this was taken to various people until it arrived with Lindsay. And at some point, from the moment Lindsay sort of took over and whatever, John Howlett faded into the background, so that although it is mentioned, I think, on screen that he co-wrote the treatment, he is not part of the screenplay.
Yeah.
I met him for the first time probably 4 or 5 years ago when there was a 50th anniversary screening of the film. And there was a group of people, including Stephen Frears, who was the third assistant on the film, and Jonathan Coe, the novelist, who was a great fan of the film and who I think knew Lindsay. There were 3 or 4 of us, and I think I'd written my little book by then, my little filming if book, and John Howlett was there, and they brought him up and he talked for a bit. And so, in other words, and the other thing, of course, was that he was me. I mean, my character was based loosely, as it were, on him. And my character was called Johnny, and he was John Howlett. Whether I don't know whether David Sherwin would have thought that he was Mick. I don't think he would. I think he might have thought, wishful thinking, that he might have been able to be as strong as Mick, but I don't know. But there was this other strange coincidence that when I was having the auditions and when I was in Little Malcolm at the Swan Theatre, Worcester, playing Malcolm was an actor called Geoffrey Beavers, and Geoffrey is still very much with us, and he directs in the theatre as well. And when I came back from the audition, and we were in the wings waiting to go on or something, and he said, "Where have you been?" And I said, "I've been auditioning." And he said, "Oh," he said, that was me. I was at that school. He said, "I think I'm probably in that screenplay." And I think he was one of the prefects. So having said that, I mean, Geoffrey is the loveliest, gentlest of men, and I can't really imagine him being one of the whips. But it was a coincidence. And when eventually I told him that I'd been asked to play Johnny, he knew that that was a good part, because I had no idea, because I hadn't seen the script. But he said, "Oh," he said, "I think that's probably one of the leading boys." But no, strange. But no, John Howlett, I don't think he resented not being part of the writing process of the film, although I can't promise that, but he seemed perfectly happy to be there and answering questions.
Oh, good, wonderful. The only other actor I want to mention that we haven't mentioned was Charles Lloyd Pack. Do you remember him at all?
Yes, I didn't have any scenes with him at all. Of course, he was the father of Roger Lloyd Pack, who very good actor, who is perhaps best known now for well, Only Fools and Horses, and also the Vicar of Dibley. He was very clever, he was very funny, but he was also a very good straight actor. And I did meet him once, and I did mention his father, who he had a very good career, I think, as a supporting character actor, but he only had that one scene because he was the Latin teacher, and it was the idea was to characterize Mick as and my character as a whelp, and they were translating from the Latin, and that led into the next scene showing the whelp who was firing darts at various establishment figures on the wall. But no, so I can't really tell you much about Charles.
As you say, is somebody that does crop up in lots of. I think he's appeared in a few of the things that I've done other events for. You know, as supporting in supporting parts.
Yes.
Of course, the action at the end. You mentioned obviously your stunt coordinator, but did you enjoy well, any boy would, you know, the machine guns and all that sort of the climactic part of the film?
Well, of course, we shot that maybe halfway through filming, so there was no progression towards it or anything. No, I was terrified. I'd never held a gun, let alone shot one. And they used a cherry picker thing to get me up on top of the school. I don't think I was on top of the chapel. I was the other side of the quadrangle, and it was quite a tricky route to get out onto the roof. So there was this cherry picker, and I was sitting up there for what seemed like hours with the second assistant director called Tim, and I knew that Lindsay would be asking me to run up one side of the that was the roof, and there was a sort of pediment, well, a sort of battlement thing down there, and I knew he'd want to see me appear over the top, run down, fling myself against the thing, and go and I wasn't looking forward to that really at all. And when I did it, that was exactly what he wanted. No one had warned me that it might be a bit loud, and that's why I'm partially deaf to this day, 55 years later, in this ear. No health and safety in those days at all. I mean, they didn't even say put a bit of cotton wool in your ear. And the only thing was, which was quite funny, was that there was an army sort of expert, and they showed me this gun and the trigger and everything, and all he said was, he said, "You see that hole there?" So I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, don't put your finger in there." And I said, "Why not?" So he said, "Well, you'll lose it." So I said, "Well, might it be possible to put a bit of sellotape over that bit there?" And, "Oh, no, that wouldn't be authentic." So I had to remember not to stick my finger in. But and of course, there was very little feeling of the whole scene happening at the same time. I mean, you know, they were all sort of close-ups on me going in and do my bit. Meanwhile, they might do Malcolm over the other side, and then Richard and Christine, of course. So it never felt like being involved in a great battle. But no, I think one was aware that it was quite important in the build up to the end.
Yeah, and of course the fencing sequence, again, there's lots of physicality in the
yeah, and I'm the most unphysical person, really. I had a lot of energy, and on the stage I used to be terrible at dancing, but I could be very physical and do silly things. And the fencing, I'd never done that because I didn't go to a drama school, didn't learn anything like that. And so this Peter Braham, who I mentioned earlier, the stuntman, he gave me a few lessons, but there was very little time to do it. So I think I look fairly amateurish. There's the first shot of me practicing, and my arm is up at a most peculiar angle, I think, for anybody who is an aficionado of fencing. But when it came to it, I mean, Malcolm was rather good, and Richard had done it too. And I sort of just joined in, and but beating down Malcolm into that corner, which he mentioned, that was quite frightening, really, because he had to hold his sword or whatever at a certain angle in order for us to hit it. And if he hadn't done that, I mean, they would have gone straight to his head, really. But so no, there were a lot of challenges that one had to face, but somehow I always used to feel this, that they weren't things I'd do in real life, but if they were something that I was doing because I was acting, then that was all right, and I'd have to face up to it. And I mean, the shower scene, oh my God, where we were all going into this shower, which was fairly cold shower all day long. It went on for a whole day, and it was a very cold day, and they were open air showers, which was an unusual thing, which they had at Aldenham. And there was this industrial sort of heater blower thing. And whenever you'd done a shot, you were sent over to it to get your hair dried, just in case you had to be put back in again to start the shot again. But other than that, it was very, very chilly. Malcolm suffered more. We should have got him talking about that, because the crew, unbeknown to him, decided to make his shower extremely cold, whereas Richard and I were let off with a slightly warmer one. As long as there wasn't steam, it was all right. But Malcolm had a really cold one, I remember. No, it was a series of challenges, but you always felt it was worth it. I mean, even on the army exercise thing, we had to go through a field with brambles and all the rest of it. And I remember thinking, oh, you know, it's extraordinary. I'm being paid to do this, but really, I wouldn't dream of doing this in real life.
This film is a part of a loose trilogy of films that, and of course you're not in the other two. Were you asked, or was it just not roles for you, or how did that kind of?
When they announced that they were going to do Oh Lucky Man, my agent rang and said, we've had a call. Would you be interested to be in Oh Lucky Man, to work for Lindsay again? And I said, look, no matter what I'm meant to be doing or what we're talking about with other people, whatever, say yes, you know, we'll make it work somehow, because I absolutely would be overjoyed to work for Lindsay again. And we never heard another word. So I wasn't asked to go back. And even in the scene at the end of Oh Lucky Man, where everybody's there, everybody who's ever been in a Lindsay film or even hasn't been in a Lindsay film are in that sort of celebratory party scene. No, I wasn't even in that. But I don't begrudge anybody that. And certainly Lindsay sent me some very nice letters and cards and things, a lot of which are in my book. And he was very complimentary. He was very, very kind. And the point was, of course, that Lindsay, he almost put Malcolm on a pedestal. I mean, Malcolm was very, very special to him, just as Richard Harris had been very special to him when he did This Sporting Life. And Malcolm was, I wouldn't say the favorite. I mean, it was just, he was the main one. And so it was quite right that he received a lot of the attention, and he became a great friend of Lindsay throughout his life. Lindsay was really his mentor throughout. And that wasn't the same for me or for Richard. And Richard and I were very miffed because we weren't invited to Cannes. And the film was going to be shown at Cannes, and Malcolm went and we didn't. And of course it won the Palme d'Or, and which was amazing, you know, which was quite wonderful. But we would have been quite pleased to have been able to celebrate that as well. But never mind. I think that was partly a budget thing as well. I mean, I think they didn't want to pay for us to go over. We certainly felt like a trio, the three of us. We all got on very well. We were all very, very different from each other, but we did get on very well, and we had various escapades. When we did the scene with the chaplain coming out of the drawer, that was in an office in Knightsbridge. It was the only location like that we had in central London, really. And at lunchtime, we were told we could go off and have an hour off. And the three of us in school uniform all went to Harrods, which was just down the road, and went right up to the top where there was Way In. In those days, there was this part of the store called Way In, which was sort of trendy clothes. And I don't know, Malcolm caused a bit of a scene, and we were going around looking at everything, and they obviously couldn't understand why these three refugees from Eton were spending their lunch hour looking through the racks at all their clothes. No, we had a lot of fun.
And to finish, is there any stories, any scenes we haven't mentioned that you would like to before we finish?
No, I don't think so, really. I mean, I'm delighted that you managed to bring Malcolm and me together. I mean, we are in touch with each other. He's extraordinary because he is working nearly all the time. And the fact that we managed to pin him down today is great. And when he comes over, he does get in touch, and we try to meet up, but it doesn't always work out. But I think we're very well aware of the fact that most of the others seem to have gone. Even a lot of the boys seem to have gone. Brian Pettifer, who played Biles, the unfortunate one who gets his head put down the loo, Brian is still around and still working, and lives and works in Scotland mainly, does a lot of television and so on. And I did meet up with him not long ago. And Richard Everett, who plays one of the boys, and who became more of a writer than an actor. And of course, Robin Asquith is still around. And the four of us met up for the 50th anniversary screening of the film at the Southend Film Festival, which was hysterical. And we got taken to the cinema in a pink limo that was normally used for hen nights and had a jukebox inside. And no, that was great fun. I think it is extraordinary how, after all this time, 55 years or something, it still means a tremendous amount, not just to us, but to a tremendous number of people. It has affected the lives of a lot of people. And when I go and do screenings, I do Q&As after them, particularly since writing my little book. The passion with which some people talk about the film and the effect it had on them then and still does now, it's very, it's very moving. It's very humbling in a way. And there are some who come up to me and they give me a line, somebody else's line, and I say, what? And they say, it's your turn, your line. And they expect me to remember all the scenes. That they know it all, which is remarkable. But
it is very quotable, isn't it? It's very, as Malcolm could remember all of it pretty much, and it is a very quotable film once you start to look into it. And just part of the reason why, of course, it's lasted the test of time, and as Malcolm was saying, it's still as relevant today as it was back then, perhaps even more so. So it's one of those sort of real classic films, I think. Well, thank you very much, David, for talking about the wonderful If, and I look forward to chatting again in the future. Thank you, Philip, very much, and delighted to be here. Thank you. All the very best. Yeah, all the best, David. A pleasure. Bye. Take care. So I just want to say thank you again to David and Malcolm for joining us this evening, and of course to the audience as well for joining. I hope you've found it of interest, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care. Bye.